Saludos, mi gente. Welcome to Tambora Dialogues. Hope everyone is feeling restored, happy, healthy, todas las cosas buenas. So I wanted to share really quickly that earlier this week, I went to Intrant here in Santo Domingo. And Intrant, I don't even know what it really stands for, what the acronym stands for, but basically is the equivalent of the Department of Motor Vehicles here in Santo Domingo, República Dominicana. But unlike the DMV, at least the one in New York City, the agency in Santo Domingo is quite modernized and very efficient. Anyway, while I was there applying for my Dominican driver's license, which I should have gotten about 1.5 years ago, and I didn't, but I'm getting that now. As I was there and I was completing the application, I noticed several questions about social identity, which had been in the not too distant past very triggering for me. But I'm happy to say not anymore. And as I sat there thinking about the questions, I began to think about how each of us has, a unique identity, an identity that is shaped by our culture, shaped by our sense of belonging, our beliefs, our values, and how our identities grow from the seeds that are planted by our parents. The stories they share with us, in our childhood, the stories that serve basically as the root, and how the branches of our identities continue to develop and grow over time with our own very own life experiences. And there's a lot of comfort that comes with that. Now imagine uncovering a 3-decade kept family secret that suddenly uproots you, that throws everything you thought you knew about yourself, your history, your family, into a tailspin. And I'm not talking about the latest popular telenovela, Hasta que la plata nos separe, right? That we all have been watching. I'm talking about real life. And so today, joining us in our drum circle is Carmen Rita Wong, and she is the author of Why Didn't You Tell Me?, a memoir. And in her memoir, Carmen Rita shares how she uncovered a tangled web of family secrets that challenged everything she believed about her identity. Carmen Rita Wong is also the author of a series of novels and 2 best-selling advice books. She is a former professor, a nonprofit board leader, a national advice columnist, and television host who co-created CNBC's On the Money. Carmen Rita, thank you for joining the drum circle today.
Thank you for having me so much.
Oh, yes, thank you. So, one of the things that I really love and appreciate about your work, particularly like your novel, Never Too Real, for example, which I read, a few years ago, is that you very intentionally have chosen to tell stories about Latina women and other women of color that demonstrate that we exist in ways, in other ways, other than the ways that we've seen on television, right? The stereotypes that we so often see. And so your memoir also centers on that aspect of social justice, right? And so can you share with our audience why for you the personal has been political?
Well, I think living in the United States as, Afro-Latina, Chinese, all these things, I don't think I have a choice. I think our existence is political. I walk out the door and I am instantly reminded as to how the outside world sees me. It's like every day is a Rorschach test. Who's going to treat me as what? Who thinks lower of brown people? Who thinks lower of women? Who thinks, who's not going to make an assumption? What should I wear today to make sure that I communicate that I'm, clean cut and, all those sort of things. That we have to think about all of these things. And sometimes we don't think about it very consciously. And then sometimes we'll walk outside in the world, we'll just make sure we are reminded who we are, how, we are seen. But I don't think that, we can't separate it. We don't have that choice. We really just don't. And I think it's very interesting, as the years have gone by and, working, of course, and covering finance for so many years, I've had a lot of Anglo folks be very confused years ago, when I would speak out and just be kind of like, oh, there's nothing to do with race or this, that, the other. And I would just be like, how do you live? Like, you get to walk outside and not be questioned, that you can walk into a store and not be followed.
Yeah.
That you can, that you're not your daughter's nanny because she came out lighter skinned, that sort of thing. So we all walk into the world, frankly, as different people because of how the society and the world around us defines us. We can define ourselves as much as we want, but we are also influenced. We're not just by how we look and how we come out, our phenotype, as we say in science, and our genetics, but our parents and the society and the times that we live in. And right now, my personal is very political.
Yeah. Yeah. But I what you said about we have no choice, right? We're politicized very early on. And I remember, as I was sharing with you before we started recording, that I spent my formative years in the Dominican Republic, and then I moved to New York at the age of 7. And I remember applying for school, right, to start school. And there was a box, right, that said, what are you? And back then, there wasn't like, there wasn't Latina or, nothing like that, right? It was just like you're white or you're Black, right? Or Hispanic, right, potentially. And I remember asking my parents, I was like, what is this? Why do I have to fill out this box? They're like, well, they want to know who you are. And I'm like, but I'm more than just these boxes. We are more than just these boxes.
We're all those boxes.
Right.
And they're like, my favorite was when they're like, pick one. And I'd be like, well, first of all, one of these things is not a race. Like, what is wrong with you? It was the idea that we have to choose is very much an idea of the people that are, the people who like to be in charge, right? Because that idea of classifying us, as you know, comes along with colonialism, and we can go very deep into those politics, and that used to be tied and still is tied to our worth, not our self-worth, but our worth in society. So we have to make a lot of determination for ourselves, what boxes we check, and if we want to check boxes, because for a lot of us, whether it's because we move, so for example, now you're in Santo Domingo, right? Or, you're in New York, or if I'm in New York, or if I'm hanging out in Chinatown, or if I'm, wherever I am in the world, our identities can be very fluid too. It's not to say that we stop being Dominicana, right? It's that we can be in other communities, in other countries, in other cultures, and feel comfortable. And that's also part of our identity too.
That's right. That fluidity. Yeah. So true. So Carmen Rita, so for those in our audience who haven't yet read your book, can we talk a little bit more, since we've already started talking about this, but how the ways that your genetic Latina and formative Chinese identities and being a daughter of immigrants shaped your trajectory here not here, but in the United States. I keep saying, well,
it did start in Santiago and Santo Domingo. That's where it all started. That's where it started, which is where, my mother's family is from, originally in Santiago and then Santo Domingo before, they came to New York in the late 50s, I want to say early 60s, late 50s. But my mother came here to New York when she was 15. It was one of those, Abuelo was part of the revolution, so he had to escape or die. And they didn't have a lot of choices, my mother and her sister, right? Because, in good old Latin culture, it's a man's house. So the family needed their documentation. So Abuelo married off his 2 daughters, my mother and my aunt, my tia, to Chinese gangsters. Now, I didn't grow up knowing that Papi was a gangster. I did not know that, of course. I knew he was in the costume jewelry business. That's what we knew. And that's what we kids understood. But he rolled up in his, big Cadillac hoopty car and his, leather jacket and rolls of bills and, coiffed hair. And it was very funny because what we think of as Chinese, or what people's stereotypical ideas of what Chinese is certainly not a Johnny Cash hair looking gangster, right? So, but meanwhile, that's what people think, like, can think very much of like Dominicans or Latinos, it's ridiculous. So yes, my whole childhood, it was upending a lot of stereotypes from the get. I didn't have them because this was my life. So we lived between Harlem and Chinatown, my older brother and I. And that very much shaped our identity because I grew up chopsticks, mangu, like everything and everything in between. But then my mother divorced him and remarried an Anglo-American man who she met through a friend who was going to Columbia University because we lived around Columbia. And unfortunately, she made the choice to agree to move to New Hampshire. And this was, and I'm like pausing because I'm just like, sometimes it's such a heavy thing. It was so seismic and so heavy and so painful, and was like the biggest schism in my life because he took us from everything we knew, I'd say the both of them, to pursue the American dream, of course. Everything we knew, not just the city and its urbanness and the subways and the sights and the smells and the sounds, but being Chinese, being Dominican, no Spanish in the house, no Dominican food, no Chinese food, no music, no nothing. She even changed the way we dress. It was probably one of the biggest like experiments of assimilation you could ever, and it was almost instantaneous, and it was devastating because all of these things made up who my brother and I, who we were.
Yeah.
And our family and community was all gone. So it was difficult. It was difficult.
No, I mean,
sure.
I imagine I can feel it, right? And
Yeah.
can you share, like, do you know, like, why was she in love? Why did she make that decision?
Well, I do write
Why
about
did
it in the
she
book, and
choose? Yeah.
and
Can
it's
you
kind
share
of
with
like
the audience
how,
why she chose to kind
yeah.
of, peel off all of that identity, all of that richness that made you all this beautiful family to now, trying to assimilate into a different environment?
Because the United States told her is that's how you make it.
Mm.
And she believed it. And she wanted to escape. Her father was abusive. Abuela was a terror. Papi was abusive. She was escaping that. She was looking to escape these men, right? And here she finds an Anglo guy who doesn't yell, scream, and hit, right? Though there are other ways to be abusive, by the way, as you can read in the book, kind of like hating who you are as a human being. That's pretty awful. But she was escaping. And as a woman in those days, think about as an immigrant woman, a very clearly Black Latina, what kind of choices did she have? Right. And you can say, oh, well, maybe she should have gone to school, but absolutely, like, her family was not going to support that. How was she going to make it out of what she probably felt was kind of like a prison? Also, she was a very, very intelligent person and an ambitious person, and not ambitious like in the bad way that a lot of culture likes to see, like, oh, a woman who's ambitious, which I know I got a lot of that crap when I was young. In a good way, is that if she were a man, she would be incredibly successful. She would have been wonderfully successful. But she was like, all right, here's a path, here's an opportunity, let me take it to get out. Yeah. But I don't think she thought about what she was leaving. I don't. And I'll tell you this, that maybe I think she felt very much like an outsider in her own family because she was ambitious and was very intelligent and was bookish. So I don't know how much she felt like, oh, I'm leaving, a loving, caring community. I don't know if she felt that. I can assume, though, that she really she wanted to get out.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean,
and frankly, create better lives for my brother and I. New York City back then, the idea. Oh, I love the city so much. So you can't get me talking smack about New York, but it wasn't exactly. I mean, I saw people get murdered on the street. Like I've seen stuff. So I know her big thing was, I'm going to get you someplace in the suburbs where it's safe. We're going to have a house. We're going to go to, you're going to go to Catholic school. We're going to have a car, all of these things that she wanted for us that she could get here. That's just what she wanted for us.
Yeah. So just going back a little bit, what do you see as, the strengths of the cultures that you grew up in, right? So the Chinese culture and the Dominican culture, like from your perspective, what was rich for you? What was fulfilling for you?
Well, it's AAPI month here in the United States. So I'm taping this at that time of Pride. I'll tell you, Chinese culture always, well, first of all, I mean, my gosh, we're talking one of the oldest civilizations on this planet. Just the incredible history, the incredible differences between cultures. Like, I knew, Poppy taught me the difference between Mongolian and Szechuan and Cantonese and all the different variations. The art, the beauty, the history, all of it. One of the things though, that I'll tell you that tied it very much to Dominicanness in my mind, in my life, because first of all, there's a lot of Asian Dominicans, just so you know. ¿Sabes qué? You know that.
I know that.
Okay?
I see them every day. Yeah.
I know some people are so surprised. I'm like, you don't even know. Okay. The Japanese Peruvians are on fire. Okay. But I think Dominican culture for me symbolized, so Chinese culture for me symbolized this incredible ancient, deep history, an incredible pride in that history. And then the Dominican culture to me represented something just as important, if not more so, because it was more immediate, which was family and love and community and the blending and melding and the richness of a culture that was created, right, of hundreds of years of some horrible things, but also some beautiful things that came out of it. So the women in my mother's life, like all of us, my whole family, we're all different colors. We're all different shades. We're all different combinations. We're dancers and doctors and this and that and the other thing. So there's a whole feeling to me of Dominicana that is like just rich with life and vitality and love. And that was wonderful compliment to what I got. So both parts of my life, and they overlapped a bit too, because in the Chinese community as well, it was very much about culture and community and pride in that way, in being a community.
Yeah. And how are you? I know that you're a mom, right? So how are you? Yeah. Like passing that on to your daughter and sharing that with your daughter. How is she accessing all of that?
Well, of course, her life is more complicated. I had her older. By that time, most of my, not all, of course, but most of my Dominican families passed away, including my mother. So yes, we traveled a lot. I was not so gifted as to have the personal connection of her growing up with abuela and, she did grow up with her tío, with my brother for a long while, very important. But what I do try to do for her is really formulate a feeling of family and community within my fellow Wong family, my brother's family, and her cousins, even though we all don't look alike. She's the only Blanquita in the family. So the Wongs are Black. Their mother's from Guyana. My daughter's father is of German descent, and she just happened to come out Blanquita. As you know, she could have come out all sorts of ways. Yeah. But this is how she is. And she very much identifies as Latina. She also identifies as a Wong. She took Mandarin for 6 years. She spoke to her Kung Kung, which is maternal grandfather in Mandarin. But she also understands that when we walk around, that people will treat her, and she's seen it and experienced it, better than me. So she knows what's up. She knows what's up. But in terms of culture and community, she is one of those who feels comfortable everywhere. And that's all I wanted for her. She feels comfortable when we go to Washington Heights, when we go, oh my God, right? Like she loves, and she feels comfortable when we go to Dominican. She feels comfortable. We've gone to Tokyo. She loves all of it. So my big thing was, if I don't have the gift of family and community, beyond what I love my cousins, my primas and primos, I love them so much, but we only see them once in a while because they don't live around here. If I don't have that, then let me just show her that she's loved, that she has family, and that the world is a big, exciting place. Not a big, scary place, not a place full of otheredness, but that she's part of a very big picture.
Yeah. Oh, that's beautiful. Love that. So let's talk about your book a little bit. Your book centers around the discovery of your paternity and, all of the stories that surrounded that. How did knowing that your paternity was not what you thought it was change your sense of self, of who you were in your life and the lives of your family?
Funny enough, it didn't change me so much as it changed how I saw my relationships with people. So, for example, I was raised 31 years as a Wong, as Chino Latina, as Papi was my father, biologically. I had a stepfather, right, for a big part of my life, but I knew what was what. There's a difference between biology and culture. We know that.
Right.
You can be Asian, you can grow up in Santo Domingo and very much be Latina. Absolutely. People look at you and be like, oh, you're Chinese. You're like, okay, well, I guess, we can be lots of things. So it didn't change me in the end so much as it changed how I saw my mother, hence why I wrote the book. And the book is very much about me and her. It's very much about figuring, the whole thing is, why didn't you tell me? So I'm talking to I wrote it as if I'm talking to her ghost and I'm solving this mystery. Who is she? And why would she do such a thing? Because it's painful. Like, why would you do that? And not lie just once, but twice. So when I confronted her as she got sick, she had cancer, she was dying. I found out, someone told me, I'm not going to give away the whole book. Yeah. Someone told me that Papi wasn't really my father. So I had to sit her down, and she made up a whole nother story about a whole nother man. And then I had to go with that for 10 years until DNA testing. Oh, science don't lie. Science don't lie. And boy, and so she took to her grave the truth. And when confronted, she chose to tell me another story. So the book is really about me figuring out who she is. And as I do that, and also it's, of course, when you have a difficult relationship with a parent, things get a little easier. I hate to say it, God bless, when they're gone. Because you can see them, you start to see them as separate human beings, not just your mother, as a person, as a little girl, as a scared teenager, as, all of those things. You can see them in a way that humanizes them much more and brings some compassion, right? Maybe not forgiveness, but compassion. Right. I have plenty of compassion. But in terms of the fathers, one of them knew. Two of them knew. I have three. Two of them knew. One passed. I didn't get to talk to him about it, but one of them knew the whole time. But he thought it was another lie. Like, he thought it was something else. Anyway, all to say, sure, Guadalupe was in charge from day one with the stories, but he also had the opportunity to let me know that whole time that I was not living the truth as to who I was, and he chose to do that. So it really changed my relationships, both with the only one who's left, because Papi passed away in June, and my mother, but myself, in terms of myself and my identity, look, you cannot erase your life experience. You cannot erase what forms you, what shapes you. So you grow, you shift, you change, but you also just can't stop who you are, no matter the biology.
That's right. So, you just said that, one of your dads chose not to tell you, even though he knew, right? And it just reminds me of all the stories that I hear in my family, and the stories that I've heard from a friend who decided to do a DNA test and found out she has a distant sister, and all that she's going through, as a result of finding that out, gets an email and learns about this. And so, I'm curious about how one manages that knowledge that they made the decision, the conscious decision not to share that truth, right? And when reading your book, it felt really raw, like you were still dealing with the story and what happened and everything. And now I see you, now speaking to you directly, it's like I see this, not a distance, but almost like, as you said, you found a way of feeling compassion, right? So how did you get there? How did you arrive at this point?
It asked my 15 years of weekly therapy. Everybody go to therapy, please. Everybody. Even if it's a sliding scale, just find somebody to talk to. You need a third party. You need somebody to just be like, to help you, just like you need to go to the doctor for checkups. Like, go find a therapist. Well, part of it is time. Part of it is the self-work, the work on myself. And part of it is that internal detective work that you do. Why am I the way I am? Especially if you find yourself, if you have a difficult relationship with a mother and you find yourself becoming a mother and being a mother, then you really are faced with, your ideas of motherhood. And a lot of the therapy that I've done is to be a better mother, is because I want to end what I was raised with. I want it to end with me as much as possible, not completely, but I want that trauma, that pain, that way of parenting to change, period. But I think for me, understand that I wrote that book. I found out the DNA, all that stuff, very close to when I started writing. And then I didn't even find out who my biological father was until after I had the book deal. I had handed in the edits. It was like a mystery unsolved. And it's like, the book it's not about finding out who he was. It was about the whole process of, why did this happen in the first place? So serendipity, blessings, whatever you want to call it, the book is in edits with my publisher, and bingo, the DNA site, the right person took a test. And there you go. I found him. So hence I had to write that epilogue. But it has been some time. And I think, let's put it this way. Either you hang on to the anger or you find peace, right? So part of finding peace for me is seeing my parents as individuals, as human beings outside of the role of my parent. And then deciding what I want to do with that. And what I want to do is I want to say, do I love my mother and my fathers? Yes. But do I now see things more clearly? Meaning, I'm not begging to be loved anymore. Children should be able to exist and be loved. You shouldn't have to beg for it, work for it, plead for it. You shouldn't have to, you should never live in that limbo or the hardworking space. You should just be loved. And I've done that for myself. And I realized that, you know what? Papi Wong was very much my father. He always sought me out. He was a real pain in the ass, but very difficult person. But he always wanted a relationship with me. He always wanted to be my father. The other ones, not so much. That's their choice.
Right.
But my choice is, I love myself now. I love my child, and I'm just going to do things differently.
Yes, that is so powerful, and so freeing, so liberating.
Yeah.
I read somewhere that you credit Papi Wong for your street hustle.
Of course.
And I was curious about, what do you feel that you got from your mom, from Lupe? What do you feel you got from her?
please. I have a line in there and says, you know, my mom blended the concrete, but I'm the architect.
Yeah.
That's how deep her contribution is. She literally created me. Like, and I don't mean just gave birth to me. I mean formative, but I was the architect. I made the choices, which drove her crazy because she wanted to control me like nobody's business, you know, but of course I was like, I am your daughter. You are not gonna be able to, come on, know yourself. You're not gonna be able to control me. She gave me so much. She's given me so much, bad and good. A lot I had to get rid of, a lot of bags I had to put down, anger, resentment, you know, entitlement, all of those things, had to put all these things down. But she definitely gave to me the idea that I was just as worthy of living a good life and a successful life and a life that I wanted as any white man on this planet. And that was incredible. That is such a huge message. Was it actually true? Because do we live in a meritocracy? No, but she definitely gave me that, you know, feeling of like, you can do it, go for it. Don't let anything get in your way. It was a big responsibility too, but it was tremendous. That was tremendous. And combine that with Poppy's street hustle and his little, you know, charm effect. And then of course my stepfather, Marty's, you know, talking with him about stocks in the Wall Street Journal and all that stuff. And yeah, here I am. I did good, but I'm tired. Tired.
Tell me, what was the experience like for you writing it all?
Oh,
Did you have to, like, you know, did you have fits and starts where you started to write it and then you took pause, you're like, I need some time, and then go back to it? Like, what was that process for you?
the whole process was about 5 years. So even though since I was a little kid, sitting in the stacks of the library, which is my sanctuary, my haven, that was my church, was losing myself in reading. And I noticed that we weren't in the stacks. Women, Latinas, Black Americans, Asian Americans, like where were we? It was like we didn't exist. And I was that little kid that I was just like, I'm one day, which is why what I love when libraries post that they have my book and I go talks at libraries. I'm like, oh my God, I love you so much. I'm like a fangirl, you know? But it was incredibly difficult because I really had, it's very important when you're doing memoir to understand, first of all, why are you doing it? And I had 2 reasons. One, because I believe in my story is an American story. It's actually a very typical American story. We don't have enough immigrant American stories. Now we're seeing it a bit more, but still something like 90-something% of the stories that are out there, the books that get sold do not get sold to anyone who's not white American. So we still need to be out there, right? And so I could reach people. That way. And then 2, because I feel it's very important to elevate our legacies. We are just as important. And that's, you know, what I just mentioned, my mother taught me, you know, it's like our legacies, our stories, our epics are incredibly important in the formation of this country. And if our stories are told more, and this is sad, but true, because the society we live in, we will take down and dismantle all of the horrible ideas and stereotypes that people have of us. And that was important to me. So, you know, all of those things, and to help, really just to help people. I can't tell you how much memoirs have helped me in my life, reading memoirs. And very few were like people who look like us or anything, but the ones that I have read and the stories that really just transformed me and made me feel so much less alone. And that's what I very much want for people who are reading it. So, but the process was long, and it took a while to figure out. First of all, I got a lot of resistance. The market was like, oh, maybe if you were just Latin, Like, I don't know about the Latin Chinese thing. It's very complicated. You're complicated. Your life was complicated. I mean, this is the constant that I kept getting back. I had to let a few agents go because, you know, they didn't understand. And then finally I found a format that really fit. I'm like, why do I want to, who wants to read a memoir? I don't just read memoirs just because you're Latina or just because you're Asian. I will not do that. Like, there's got to be like, what is the story? Right. I might buy your book, as you can see. I just buy books, but I may not read it. But I wanted everyone to be able to read this book and get sucked in from page one. So I wrote it as a kind of mystery thriller to get more people to read it, frankly. And so it took a long time, but once I found the right agent, Latina, mira eso, Latina, Matt, like, oh my God, let me tell you, years of work. She had it sold in 2 weeks.
Wow.
To Crown Penguin, which of course is like top 3 publishing house. So she did it. So sometimes, look, books, just like life, it's about finding the right person, but never, just don't stop. Just don't stop.
Yeah. Yeah. We had Carolina Saavedra was on here in our drum circle a couple of weeks ago, and we talked about, you know, the importance of being your whole self.
Yeah.
And how sometimes, you know, when you're navigating in white spaces, it's hard to be your whole self, right? Because everything that's coming at you and the lack of understanding. But then when you find that person, that Latina person who strongly believes in your story and can champion it, like, just everything starts to open, everything starts to fall into place. And so you bring your whole self, you have someone who's like-minded, who totally gets it, and then the experience is just, you know, life-changing. And so I'm seeing the common threads between, you know, your experiences, between your experience with your book and also, you know, her experience with her project with John Leguizamo.
Yeah. I mean, that's the thing, is that also too, you know, you got to understand that if we work hard enough to be able to get in a position of power, you've got to reach back. And that's the whole personal political thing. Like, no, you need to do that. It can't just be for you. Right. So that's what we do.
That's right. So I have a couple of more questions that I would like to ask you. One is about, like, you know, your brother. You know, I feel the love you know, when you mention him, I feel that love. And so how was he, how was that relationship with him after, you know, writing your book and finding all these things out? Did it change, shift at all? You know, how was he involved, you know, with your daughter? You mentioned a little bit of it, but wondering how that relationship evolved.
Well, he was my big brother, and he was the other wrong. And he was the one who knew me from the day I was born, and was protective. You know, there were a few years in there, of course, high school years where you hate each other. But I always looked up to him and always admired him, and, you know, wanted to hang out with him in his room and listen to his records and steal his books. And we shared a lot of great interests, but he was the most important person in my life, more than my parents, even, I would say, because he was my rock. And for my daughter, because her father, she's been with me by herself since she was 4. So without a father figure, her tío was her everything. And he was father to her cousins who she's so close with. So this was a father figure for her. And she was so close, and he loved her, and actually sometimes treated her like he used to treat me when I was little, which was so pain in the ass. Which is fine. I'd be like, stop poking her. So we grew up also just very different in this white space. We were both felt just completely like a couple of just unwanted aliens there. So he's the only one who really understood that. And he's the only one who understood the pain of leaving behind all that we had left behind. And he was just the one who always showed up for everything. When he showed up for me at my graduations, he showed up for me at any events, awards. He was my biggest fan, and I was his biggest fan. And I wish that everyone would have that, because not everybody does. My parents were a little too occupied with themselves. So, it was like, yes, I had to get straight A's and win awards and be successful, but it wasn't like they would show up to an award ceremony or an event, or even, my stepfather, when I had my first show, I called him after this. I write about this in the book. I called him from the car ride home. I mean, this was a national show that I co-hosted. I wrote. It was like, I'm on every week. Like, you kidding? He watches this network. And he was like, I can't watch it. So why? It's too depressing. Because it was during the crisis, the 2008, recession. And let me tell you, if that doesn't tell you what our relationship, you know what I mean? It's like, and what you need in life are those people that show up for you. So my last show, because my show got canceled after a couple of years, which no tears for me, trust me, because that was just fine. But I was at my brother's with his family, and he was having a big Super Bowl party. And my last show was airing right before. He had on that big screen, and I didn't even know he was going to do this. And he turns this on, and he has me, and I'm like, oh my God, I'm like, turn it off. And he's like, that's my sister. That's my sister. Everybody needs that.
Absolutely.
And unfortunately, he's not with us, and his passing is a big part of the book, and absolutely devastating, and something I'll never recover from. But having that is what got me to where I'm at. Having that cheerleader, having that person that loved me no matter how crazy I was, no matter how many marriages I've had, no matter how many bad decisions I made. I could call him every day. I talked to him every day. So I wish that for everybody. He was a good man, a strong working man. His business fell through in that recession in 2008. He ended up losing everything, but he was able to spend more time with his kids, because he was one of those striving entrepreneurs. And he was so disappointed that he really felt this country failed him, because he really was served this idea of meritocracy, that if you just work hard enough, you will be successful. And he ended up losing everything because of market changes, right? And it was heartbreaking. But in the end, he had got a fun job, had got a whole bunch of friends, got to see his children, and at least that all happened before he passed. But yeah.
No, I mean, you're right. We all need that someone or someones who love us as we are, right?
Yes.
As we are in whatever moment
Yes.
we're in. That's so important, because it helps with, restoration and reparation and the healing process. Yep. But it also helps with, your aspirations, right? It helps, with transformation. And I like you, I wish that for everyone.
Yes, for sure. I mean, he was also the first person I called when anything went wrong.
Yeah.
And he was always there. My first divorce, I could barely keep it together. I was in graduate school. I was only in my 20s, and I was just destroyed. And he drove from Maryland, where he was living, drove up, because we had a phone conversation, and he was scared for me. And he made that long drive, even with little babies at home, and made that long drive to come and check on me and to go out for Chinese food. And fill me up with Chinese food, make sure I was okay. And he slept on my couch.
Yeah, no, that's
we all should have that.
Absolutely. And I am blessed to have that, in my brother, and in my cousins who I grew up with, and are one of the motivating reasons why we moved out here, is to give my children that opportunity of closeness, of family, of connectedness that I felt that we were all missing back in New York.
Oh, I love that.
Yeah.
I love that so much.
So as we come, as our time together comes to a conclusion, I wondered if you can share, some final thoughts or advice, for the girls and women who have had similar experiences as yours, in their homes, whether it was being othered, or whether it was, that tense relationship with their moms, and those of us who are still straddling, right, the many worlds and cultures. What final thoughts or advice would you have for all of us?
That taking care of yourself is okay. That resting is okay. That sometimes not talking to people is okay. I also think one of the biggest transformative things that's happened to me lately, which is great, is make sure you think about how much of your life you're living and how many things and ways that you are, whether it's the way you parent or the way you work or the way you dress even, or do your hair, whatever it is, how much of that is being done because of someone else or for someone else versus who you genuinely are. Because you don't want to be like, you don't want to wait until your 40s to be able to live the life like as to, you know, who you really are, if you can, though it's never too late. It's never too late. But really figure that out. Who are you living your life for? And if you really want to live your life for yourself, what does that look like? And it doesn't have to separate you from family. It doesn't have to separate you from your community. It's not selfish. It's it'll actually make you more you know, and maybe some people won't support that because it'll threaten, you know, their control over you or whatever it is. But, you know, sometimes it's okay if you don't have certain people in your life.
It's okay to say goodbye. It's
okay. Okay. And you can just, you know,
it may be painful, but it's okay.
It's okay.
Yeah.
Sometimes the pain of being with and around somebody is much more than the pain of saying, oh, okay, I think we're good.
Yeah. That's
right?
Yeah.
So take care of yourself for sure.
Oh, Carmen Rita, thank you so much for joining our drum circle today and, you know, for sharing your powerful story with us. Folks, if you haven't read the book, go out and get it, please. It is incredible. And it's called again, Why Didn't You Tell Me?
En español también.
Ah, sí, ¿verdad? Ya está en español. Fantástico.
Sí.
Okay, there you go, folks. To our listeners, I leave you with a quote. As y'all know, I love my quotes from Ralph Ellison. If you don't know Ralph Ellison, he was an American writer and scholar, and his novel that I love is called Invisible Man. And he said that when I discover who I am, I'll be free. And so I wish that for every single one of you. I wish you freedom. Hasta pronto, mi gente. Take good care.